Hello and welcome to the Knowing Show. I am your host, Christene Marie. Y'all, what's today? Happy Monday. I'm our conversation tonight. We are talking about a subject that I'm very curious to see what we'll find. And the reason why I say that is because so often, every single one of these shows where we get on to talk about the cultivation of the human intelligence in a post AI world, we're looking at how do we as businesses examine the shift and evolution of the way people are buying and selling. But this show specifically, we really dive into the human evolution of how do we adjust as a result of the fact that so many people are doing business with robots. They're engaging and looking for connection with robots. So whereas so many business conversations and business podcasts talk about this through that lens, we're taking a perspective of, okay, well, what about the individual? How do we as parents, as bosses, as employees, how do we cultivate ourselves for the purpose of ensuring job security, for the purpose of leading well, for the purpose of actually fostering and cultivating our greatest asset, which is ourselves? So we're coming at this whole conversation through that lens of cultivating our inner intelligences, which is the intellectual intelligence, the emotional intelligence, spiritual and physical intelligence. To that last point, the physical intelligence, there's a book by Bessel van der Kolk. He's a psychologist, and he really actually kind of broke through this mold, I guess you could say, of people who really didn't a lot of psychologists back then and psychiatrists back in the day, 50 years ago, really did not have a grasp on how trauma follows us throughout our life. It was kind of very limited, and it really lacked a breadth of understanding, to the point where war veterans were not given an understanding around their own trauma, and post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, wasn't a thing back then. And Bessel van der Kolk's research and his study really showed how the body keeps the score. It remembers the bombs exploding. It remembers the impact of that car hit going at 50 miles an hour, careening into your car. But it especially remembers the impact of a child passing away in your arms as a result of that crash. And those are some of the stories from his book. It's titled The Body Keeps a Score. So on the show, when we talk about the physical intelligence, we're talking about that aspect of how our body stores and retains memories from the past that show up in the present moment. And understanding our own biology. This is something that I'm excited to really pursue over the next year. Understanding how our biology and how our stress hormones kick into gear, and how even our own mind and brain shuts off when we're only at 40% capacity, because we're wired for survival. So a lot of our ability to really leverage the full propensity of the human being is not even just in the cultivation of our internal intelligences, the emotional, intellectual, and spiritual, but it's in the physical. It's learning to conquer the mind when the mind tells us to stop. It's learning to push past the physical limitations that we feel and recognize I actually have a lot more prowess that I could walk in if I knew how to take control of my physical body and my mind. So it's kind of those two aspects working in concert together, where our physical body stops shutting down. Our brain then reads those senses and says, "Oh, we're done." And then we actually have to say, "No, actually, you're only at 40%. David Goggins talks about this in his book, where he's talking about the concept of the 1 second rule. When our body starts shutting down, when we're only at 40%, we still have an extra 60% to go. But what the body does is it almost gets flooded, it gets overwhelmed, and it starts freaking out. And our cortisol levels, that's our stress hormone, it spikes really, really high. And so what David Goggins talks about is this concept of just taking it one next second and then the next second. He uses the example of when he was in Navy SEAL training, and they were effectively getting waterboarded by the Pacific Ocean. They were laying down in the sand, and the water kept coming up in their face, and they're swallowing it, and it's going up their nose. And he had this thought of, how am I going to survive? I think it was 20 more days of this hell. And he's like, I can't do that. My body, like, I actually cannot stand this kind of torment. And then in that moment, rather than his thoughts racing and accelerating and his heartbeat increasing and kind of getting flooded and overwhelmed, it's like you've got a cup of water, let's say, and then it starts getting filled and filled and filled. And then once you kind of start overflowing and you're so flooded, we kind of tap out. We emotionally, mentally, physically cannot stand the internal stress that we're feeling. And so what he learned in that moment of literally kind of being waterboarded in the Pacific Ocean alongside all these almost Navy SEALs, he learned the power and the art of calming the mind and just focusing on the next second, just focusing on the next breath. And there's this element of kind of mind control where we don't even realize, y'all, how much more we could be kind of tapping into our own resources if we learned how to do this. So while we're on the Knowing Show, it's talking about knowing our mind, knowing our body, knowing our soul, knowing our spirit, knowing our own self, our own prowess, our own potential. For the purpose then to, somebody asked me the other day, I was a guest on a podcast, and he said, what is the greatest differentiator for somebody 2 to 3 years from now in a post AI world? What's going to be the thing that really differentiates us? And it is the ability to have that inner self cultivated, to offer something where maybe it's not hard skills like these AI tools can easily replace, but maybe it's the soft skills. Maybe it's the interpersonal skills of relationship building, of knowing how to connect with people, how to draw them out, how to ask questions, how to even self-regulate. Because I got to tell you, these bots are doing what we want them to do. And how much more so are people going to start firing people who talk back and don't actually do what they want? So we need emotionally healthy leaders. We need emotionally healthy and regulated employees for us to then be able to create something. I read this book by Brene Brown a couple of years ago, and this was actually kind of the first start to this process and this journey of coming to know myself and this journey of emotional health for so many years. I think I was 26, 27 when I first started paying attention, like, oh, emotions aren't a bad thing. They're not a sign of weakness. And when I was 28, I read this book, Daring Greatly by Brene Brown. And it had such a profound impact on me because she talks about this concept of how when you're not able to feel emotionally, psychologically safe in a work environment, you're not going to ideate. You're not going to create. You're not going to dream of something different. You're not going to look and consider a new way of doing something, a new process perhaps that would actually get us to the next level as a business. Because if we are creating, we are thus kind of vulnerable around this thing. We don't know if it's going to work. It's new. So for us to create anything new, we have to exist inside the bounds of somewhere where we feel safe, because there is always vulnerability associated with creativity. So if we want to have ingenuous companies where we're actually moving and advancing beyond our current scope and our current state of the business, we need to have employees that feel safe to create, to try, to fail. I love, love, love Theodore Roosevelt's speech that he gave in 1914 in Paris. There's this section in the speech where he talks about the man in the arena who knows the taste of triumph and the taste of defeat, but at least he has dared greatly. So this whole premise, Brene Brown's book it's titled Daring Greatly. Theodore Roosevelt talks about the man in the arena daring greatly. It requires a safe arena where when your employee walks through the door at work, is there a four-cornered office, a four-cornered building and structure in place where they can fail, they can offer new ideas, they can actually push the boundaries, they can say, I don't agree with that. Or are they going to get backlash by an unhealthy, dysregulated leader? Or maybe, here's actually, I think, what could be worse. Maybe one day they're loved and praised for being vulnerable and sharing and being creative. But then literally the next, the employee shows up the exact same way, but now the leader had a bad morning or a bad night the night before, and they're emotionally dysregulated, and they're bringing their past yesterday here into the present moment in the office. So now the employee is experiencing two very different aspects of reality. Yesterday, kind, loving leader. Today, scary, terrible boss. There is no way we're going to feel safe on an emotional, psychological level to thus be able to offer ingenuity in the workplace. So, this concept extends far beyond into the workspace, from the boardroom all the way to the bedroom. How do we show up for our spouses? How much more so when we walk into our children's bedroom? Do they feel like there's a safe, loving parent coming in? Or do they kind of stiffen? Is it like, what's the experience going to be like today? Y'all, that space, our homes, what kind of space are we giving to our children? Do they feel emotionally safe to be with us? And, we talk about emotional safety, and this whole conversation tonight, I love this topic, is sacrifice love? And this is really, really important, because I was actually in a relationship for a long time where love was defined as sacrifice by my former partner. And I grew up with a misconstrued view of love that felt very emotionally and psychologically unsafe. So if we're conflating and basically saying love equals sacrifice, or I interpret that as love is unsafe, well, there's no way we're going to be able to show up in a way that allows for us to walk in the fullness of our own creative potential, our own ability to add a meaning to the world, where we're adding benefit, where we're, supplementing the lives that we're around. The likelihood is that we're actually kind of taking away, because we actually are not coming from a place where we are secure in and of ourselves. It was so interesting. Tonight we were driving. We've been driving from Boston to Maine, and we were listening to the book David Copperfield. And it's interesting. My darling has two boys, and the boys were sitting in the back, and we were talking about, we paused the show, the audiobook that we were listening to that's being acted out. It's a brilliant representation of the book. But it was interesting because we were sharing with the kids around why bullies exist. And the boys have had thank God, they haven't really experienced the brunt of that. And so we were talking about, why do people bully? And so much of the time, it's a lot of, because of what happened in the past. It's what happened to them, where we're acting out that which we've seen. So, to this concept of what's modeled for us, we are most likely going to continue on into our adult life. The way that this kind of connects, and the way that this works throughout this whole conversation of actually becoming vulnerable and daring greatly, that informs the way we create, that informs, hopefully, our own ability to walk in the fullness of who we are and who we can be. But if the arena, if the environment in which we exist does not feel psychologically, emotionally safe, there is no way we're going to be able to walk into that potential. So, my question for each one of us tonight is, what was modeled for us growing up? What was relationship like? What was the relationship like between your parents? What was the relationship like from your father to you, from your mother to you? What about your father to your sister, or your father to your brother? So man to man, man to boy, maybe man to boy, mother to boy, mother to daughter, father to daughter, father to mother. The reason why it's so important to consider this, think of it kind of like a diamond. You twist it, and all of a sudden you see it hits different parts of the light. If we're only looking at one aspect and one dimension of our childhood, we're going to be missing a lot of the other context. What was modeled for us is most likely going to be the thing that we replicate and that we end up recreating. So, for us to become true creators in our lives, we need to be able to feel the safety in our own environment today to create something new. We were talking about it from a business perspective. For us to create a new product, a new service, a new system, there needs to be a four-wall container that feels safe for failure, a four-wall container where it feels safe for ingenuity, new ideas, pushback even. So failure, ingenuity, and then also feedback, and actually pushing against the envelope. Will our leaders, can we ourselves even experience the challenge there? So that's obviously in a workplace where it's kind of easier to be objective. But what about in our own homes? And for those who have not done this work, and I think a lot of us haven't, we haven't sat down and considered what was modeled for me across every sphere, every dimension of that diamond that constitutes a familial dynamic. What was modeled for me regarding what constitutes the financial relationship. It's all relationship. It's me in relationship with money. It's me in relationship with power. It's me in relationship with let's say a loved one. It's me in relationship with a child. It's me in relationship to a dog. Y'all, it's really funny. Like I've seen people get really, really angry at animals because they have a fundamental lack of value towards that living entity because that was modeled for them when they were younger. So, what was modeled for us? Until we understand what was modeled for us, we are going to subconsciously make that our environment and replicate rather than recreate. For many of us, in order for us to even ask this question or answer this question, rather, is sacrifice really love? You can insert is blank really love because each one of us had a different understanding of what love was based on what was modeled for us. For me, it was, I think, one, how do I even want to say this? I want to say something around good behavior. Like good behavior, like warranted love. Like I received love in relationship to that. And I think that that kind of subconsciously inbred this concept between our entire family of if you love me, you will never make me upset. You will never do anything wrong. If you love me and if you love the family, well, then you're always going to look, sound, walk, talk, act like us. So there was this actually equation of modeling is love. So that's probably the better way to say it. So then growing up today as an adult, it's like, well, gosh, if I want to do anything different, they're going to think I don't love them. That correlation is so important. So, going back to this whole concept around sacrifice, my former partner had a correlation that love is sacrifice. So, the majority of our relationship, he was he was unhappy. You know, he actually really didn't he really struggled in a lot of ways. And whenever I would ask if he loved me and kind of draw that out, he would say, well, love is sacrifice. So our lack of understanding of what was modeled for us and how that shows up in the present moment, our inability to identify, oh, I'm replicating what was modeled. And it's both. So, first, it's understanding what was modeled. What are we replicating? And then, two, identifying what even is the reality of my own ideal. What do I want love to be? What is love actually in and of itself? To then, so number one is identifying what are we modeling? What are we replicating? Two, what even is our own ideal? And charting that out and getting specific. What is my own ideal for love? What is my own ideal for relationship with money, with power, with wealth, with family, with friends? So identifying our own ideal. And then third, creating the environment that facilitates and fosters the ability to actualize that which we want. Otherwise, we have not even misplaced targets. We're shooting against somebody else's target entirely because what was modeled for us was their target, whether they liked it or not, whether they admitted it or not, and we made their target ours simply by the fact that we have not created our own targets. So, one, what are we remodeling effectively? What are we modeling after? What are we replicating? Two, what are our own ideals? Defining those, getting so incredibly crystal clear. And then third, creating new environments that foster and facilitate the achievement of that. Before we keep going, I just want to jump over here in the chat and say good evening. It's so good to see you all. I'm so glad to be here. Wayne, hello, my friend. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so glad to see you. Saul, hello. Is this on a loop? I don't know. We're here. We're live. I'm glad to see you. Goose Hunter, hello. I'm glad to see you. Rob Mack, thanks for joining. Hello from Greece. Oh, I love that you I love that you're here. I have really been missing Santorini, so I just seeing seeing you say hello from Greece. I'm like, oh, I want to go back. Chris, oh, I just got back from reading that. Or okay, Brianna says reading that. Okay, Chris says I just got back from, but then I missed where you came back from. Oh, you just came back from Athens. Oh, I love that. Oh my gosh. All right. Well, I was in Athens and I was just thinking about Athens the other day. Brianna, I think you said you're reading The Body Keeps the Score. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Kevin Hill, hello. Ansley, good to see you. I'm glad you're here. Aaron says video quality sucks. I hope not, but I'm sorry if it is. I'm at an Airbnb, so I'm sure it's not great. Marcos, hello. Yeah, Yaga, hello. Andrew, Kostas, hello. Busies, I'm so glad to see you. It's been a while. Chronicle, Majar, Honest says it's all mental, isn't it? So true. It's such a mental game. Johnny Doe, Island, Antonio, Honest Outlaw. Practice what you preach. Everyone can talk a good game. That's so good. Ronnie Henry, hello. I'm glad you're here. James Hay, good to see you. Marjan Majara, good to see you again. The Show of Life, hello. Arisha, Urson, thanks for joining. Percocet, hello. Thank you. I'm always grateful for when the community kind of stands up and says the truth. Sage, good evening. Timothy, hello. The Show of Life. I'm just looking at your stuff. This is so funny. All right, just let me actually hop over to really fast. It's easier for me to check out the comments there. Thunderous, it's a kind of unselfish love to sacrifice somebody or somebody that you love, like saving your life or dying for sin like Jesus did. Thank you, Brian. He says she reads the chat after. I'm so glad. Thank you, my friend. Reason why they bully, because kids are different. It's funny. I think that you're right. There's so many reasons why people bully. Oh my gosh. Adnan, hello. Simon, thank you for joining. Ian, hello. Interesting. My CPU is a neural net processor, a learning computer. Interesting. Taryn, hello. Dylan. Jamith, hello. Sergey, hello. Thank you, Ian. I appreciate you. Kev, hello. Joseph, good to see you. Revon, hello. Taron, thank you, Taron. I appreciate that. Ga, hello. Adnan, just continuing to go through the chat. The Fact Hub, good to see you. 2882 says, please read the chat if you're real. I'm reading. Saul Badman, hello. I love this. Brian, see everyone saying this is AI, and Brian says, scroll on if you don't think so. I love that. Goose Hunter says, in extreme situations, our mind moves to the dimension of the past to activate the learned paradigms of survival and then take us through the uncertain present to a stable area of the future. That is so beautifully said. Wow. I'm going to read that one more time. That was so beautifully and articulately said. In extreme situations, our mind moves to the dimension of the past to activate the learned paradigms of survival and then take us through the uncertain present to a stable area of the future. Man, that is so, 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 so well put. My gosh. Comic Flick Fusion, hello. I'm so glad you're here. 18 Malborn, hello. Glad you're back. Brendan, hello. Um, Ario, good to see you. KC, Big C, hello. Beautiful from Hawaii, your evening. It's a beautiful evening. Hello. I'm glad you're here. So much church history in Greece, Pete says. Man, I want to go back and like really do Greece for a while. I just went to Santorini for, I think I was there for a week, but I didn't do like history tours. It was more so just, I think I was writing that week. I can't remember. Bruce, hello. Bill, um, Turin Games. It's the dudes. All right, I'm just going to scroll down. Bruce Sky, hello. Tommy, hello. St. Bernard, good to see you. Mark Mills, Chip. Um, mm, I love this. Bruce Jeffrey says lots of bullies because of jealousy. So if you get picked on, maybe because you're doing it right and got what they want. Remember to love and stay positive. You know, what a good perspective. That's such a good perspective. I think honestly, I forget that one. So I'm really grateful that you said that. That adds so much color to the conversation of bullies. Northeast Coasty, hello. All right, y'all. Selvara, hello. Marty, good to see you. Matt, thanks for joining. Okay, I am going to read our Course in Miracles, Bruised Sky. What we talk about here on the show. We talk about cultivating our core intelligences, the spiritual, the intellectual, the physical, the emotional intelligence. And y'all know one of the most important, I said that weird, one of the most important things to, and why we do this is to really build up our greatest asset. If we think about where we could invest monetarily, where we invest our time, we yield results and we yield return for every single investment. And so what greater investment is there? What greater asset could we cultivate than that of our soul and spirit and self? So for those reasons, and in this AI age, it's okay, let me actually take the time to cultivate myself, to really build equity with and in myself for the purpose of relationships, for the purpose of even solidifying my ability to stand out and differentiate myself when the job cuts start happening. A lot of people have lost their jobs, more than they're reporting on. And so it's actually behooves us to do this work of cultivating our inner life, because that is going to be the thing, not just for the sake of stability in a workplace, but man, what better thing to do than to be able to enjoy your own company, to not have to outsource our worth and our identity, but to know who we are and to have peace and reconciliation with that, where we really actually enjoy who we are. I was talking earlier about my darling's boys, and one of his boys said to him, he was like, do you ever just look in the mirror and really like what you see? And my darling was like, no, like I don't do that. Y'all, there's something around kids, not always, but there's something around the confidence of children before they've been put on enough, before they've been, attacked for their identity, saying you're not enough, before they are hearing all the media, before they're getting on their phones and seeing all the crap that's delivered. So much of that kind of childlike confidence can actually be restored and recovered the more we cultivate and heal from those pasts. Goose Hunter said it so, so, so well. When we are in a high stress environment and a situation, our mind reverts back to these paradigms from the past that it knows. So we have to create new paradigms for the situations that are required of us to walk in the fullness. Yesterday we talked about our purpose. So to walk in the fullness of our purpose, what are the new paradigms that are necessary for us to be able to withstand when the going gets tough? So I just love that you said that. Christopher Adams, I love that you're here. No pain, no gain. Sacrificing comfort in some way is the price for growth. Man, what a good perspective. If you love someone, if you love even, I'll go so far as to say, if we love ourselves, if we love our mission, if we love those around us, are we willing to make those choices necessary to be able to get us to those places? My darling said this the other day, and it's funny, a lot of this I think it does have to do with parenting in a way. And so he said, I'm parenting. I'm probably not going to see the results until they're 30, 40, maybe earlier, but I'm parenting for the 30-year-old, not for who they are today and the choices that I'm making that maybe they will or will not like. So actually talk about the longest stretch of delayed gratification. If we are, which I know I struggle with this, addicted to the instantaneous gratification of the dopamine hit that comes, if we're wanting to do something great with our lives, if we want to parent greatly, if we want to dare greatly, as we were talking about Theodore Roosevelt's quote and Brene Brown's book, then we have to be able to withstand the lack of dopamine for however long is necessary, because those results compound over time for the investment. We might not see the yield or return on our investment for many years, even decades. Is it still worth it? Is that temporary sacrifice worthy of the potential for gain, even if we don't even see it actualize? And, we talked about this yesterday. I think it was the conversation around purpose yesterday. We talked about having clarity of the why, so that that's really what keeps us going when we're at this point of like, do I believe it enough? And then identifying what are those maybe like lesser yields, so that maybe I have this grand mission of something that I really feel called to do, that I want to change the world at some level. But what are the lesser areas that I can still have those yields, so that, again, when the going gets tough, we can self-sustain. We can have that endurance. This is why, I never understood endurance until I trained for a marathon. It was it was my brother-in-law who was he was killed by a drunk driver when he was 26 years old, and it was what would have been his 30th birthday. And my sister was her husband and her daughter's father. And we decided to run a marathon in his honor. And it was awful. Like, I've never been, I never again have I run a race, but I never understood that kind of mental game that is, my body can and it will go forward if I command it to and make it do so. It is simply a mind game. It is simply conquering the mind and willing my body to move in submission to the vision that I hold for my life. So, do we even have a vision that's great enough to perpetuate endurance and to propel us forward? I'm going to hop over to I'm going to go ahead and hop over to today's lesson in A Course in Miracles, because that is my commitment to myself, is to read this every day. And I did not do it every single day this year, but we've probably made around lesson 187 today. I've probably read 170 lessons. So we're getting there. Lesson 187. I bless the world because no one can give unless he has. In fact, giving is proof of having. We have made this point before. What seems to make it hard to credit is not this. No one can doubt that you must first possess what you would give. It is the second phase on which the world and true perception differ. Having had and given, then the world asserts that you have lost what you possessed. The truth maintains that giving will increase what you possess. How is this possible? For it is sure that if you give a finite thing away, your body's eyes will not perceive it yours. Yet we have learned that things but represent the thoughts that make them. And you do not lack for proof that when you give ideas away, you strengthen them in your own mind. Perhaps the form in which the thought seems to appear is changed in giving, yet it must return to him who gives. Nor can the idea it takes be less acceptable. It must be more. Ideas must first belong to you before you give them. If you are to save the world, you first accept salvation for yourself. But you will not believe that this is done until you see the miracles it brings to everyone you look upon. Herein is the idea of giving clarified and given meaning. Now you can perceive that by your giving is your store increased. Protect all things you value by the act of giving them away, and you are sure that you will never lose them. What you thought you did not have is thereby proven yours. Yet value not its form, for this will change and grow unrecognizable in time, however much you try to keep it safe. No form endures. It is the thought behind the form of things that lives unchangeable. Give gladly, and you can only gain thereby. The thought remains and grows in strength as it is reinforced by giving. Thoughts extend as they are shared, for they cannot be lost. There is no giver and receiver in the sense the world conceives of them. There is a giver who retains, another who will give as well, and both must gain in this exchange. For each will have the thought and form most helpful to him. What he seems to lose is always something he will value less than what will surely be returned to him. Never forget you give but to yourself. Who understands what giving means must laugh at the idea of sacrifice. Nor can he fail to recognize the many forms which sacrifice may take. He laughs as well at pain and loss, at sickness and at grief, at poverty, starvation, and at death. He recognizes sacrifice remains the one idea that stands behind them all, and in his gentle laughter are they healed. Illusion recognized must disappear. Accept not suffering, and you remove the thought of suffering. Your blessing lies on everyone who suffers when you choose to see all suffering as what it is. The thought of sacrifice gives rise to all the forms that suffering appears to take. And sacrifice is an idea so mad that sanity dismisses it at once. Never believe that you can sacrifice. There is no place for sacrifice in what has any value. If the thought occurs, its very presence proves that error has arisen and correction must be made. Sacrifice and suffering can long endure before the face of one who has forgiven and has blessed himself. The lilies that your brother offers you are laid upon your altar, with the ones you offer him beside him. Who could fear to look upon such lovely holiness? The great illusion of the fear of God diminishes to nothingness before the purity that you will look on here. But be not afraid to look. The blessedness you will behold will take away all thought of form and leave instead the perfect gift forever there, forever to increase, forever yours, forever given away. Now are we one in thought, for fear is gone. And here before the altar to God, one Father, one Creator, and one thought, we stand together as one Son of God, not separate from him who is our source, not distant from one brother who is part of our one self, whose innocence has joined us all as one. We stand in blessedness and give as we receive. The name of God is on our lips, and as we look within, we see the purity of heaven shine in our reflection of our Father's love. Now are we blessed, and now we bless the world. What we have looked upon, we would extend, for we would see it everywhere. We would behold it shining with the grace of God, and holy sight is ours. We offer it to everything we see, for where we see it, it will be returned to us. In form of lilies, we can lay upon our altar, make it a home for innocence itself, who dwells in us and offers us his holiness as ours. Y'all, I want to go back to kind of the beginning. Ideas must first belong to you before you give them away. Y'all, how many of us are operating from the truth of an idea that is not manifesting in our life? So if I have the idea, and this is an idea that was formed, and I like to think of them as narratives. If I had an idea or a narrative form when I was a child, I'm going to see that play out in my life. For example, I had this narrative come to mind when I was about 9 years old, and the narrative was, it's me and God against the world. And it really was, it's, kind of this like, no one's really to be counted on or trusted. This is just, I'm alone. I've got to do it on my own. And there really wasn't anything that sparked that I can even remember. But I just had this understanding of, it's me and God against the world, and how am I now going to engage with it? And now in adulthood, things happen that keep kind of reinforcing that narrative until that narrative changes. So, this whole concept around what we were talking about leading up to this point in the conversation. Number 1, what are those areas that were what was modeled for us as children? Because we're going to repeat those things. And then 2, what are our ideals? Do we have a different thought, a different narrative, a different idea that we actually want to move forward to? Because for so long as what was modeled for us is the way that we're kind of operating, those paradigms, like Goose Hunter was talking about here in the chat, for so long as those paradigms, those narratives remain unchecked, unanalyzed, then they're going to be the operating system of our mind, of the way that we make decisions, of the way that we show up in the world. So, number 1 is what was modeled for us, because we are recreating that, or we're replicating it, let's say that. Number 2 is what are the ideals? What would we move away from? What is the 180-degree change that we want to see, so that we don't do a 360 repeat of history, because we haven't actually done the work to identify what is and then identify a new target. And then for that new target to be actualized in our lives, we actually need to create the environment that houses the ability for that ideal to come true. Yes, I know everybody loves manifestation, and I'm sure I've seen some of the power of it. I'm sure that there's way more that I have yet to tap into. But what I have experienced is that, man, if I create the space in which the ideal sits, then it's the habits, it's the rituals, it's the every single day feeding into this ideal and cultivating this ideal with intention, so that that which I invest is going to yield returns in accordance with my own ideals. But am I actually living in accordance with an ideal that I set for me, so that I'm recreating versus replicating? There's a very big difference there. So, this question around sacrifice, if I have a concept around love, or around what I'm showing up as in relationship, that is sacrifice, well, then that is going to be the experience that I'm going to have. Versus, this is a joy for me to be able to show up and engage with this family or friend or coworker. And because I'm now framing the environment and creating a space of joy or peace, or whatever, insert emotion, insert quality of life, because the emotions that we carry do end up impacting the environment in which we exist. So, what is the ideal environment? And then, how are we going to create the space, changing what we need to internally, creating those physical hallmarks of that space? For example, if we want a peaceful home, some really easy ways to facilitate that are buying candles or playing soft music. My mom did that growing up. We always had candles lit in the bathrooms. She always had fresh plants around the house. She had music playing. She learned to play the piano and would play for our family. And I actually now I got a piano, and I'm going to start practicing because I want to bring that into my home. But first, we need to know what's the ideal, so that now we can create the environment around it. But if what was modeled for me, that love is sacrifice, or relationships are sacrifice, or maybe relationships are something to be afraid of. People will betray me. Maybe a narrative is I don't belong. If that's our narrative, that's going to become the thing that lives in place of the ideal. So, whatever is the existing narrative is the environment around which we cultivate. So, if we have a fundamental belief about ourselves that we don't belong or we're not wanted, we are subconsciously creating that environment, because that was what was modeled for us. That was what we experienced in the past. And thus we are replicating that. We're making that be true. Versus, kind of think of it like a circumference, and in the nucleus is either our narrative, it's our ideal. So either it has this ideal been created by me, or has it been modeled for me, or given to me, or simply something I experienced by proxy of whatever age I was. Have we created our own nucleus and thus extended outward into create the environment that fosters that? So, going back to today's lesson, ideas must first belong to you before you can give them. So, any kind of change we want to see in the world around us, any kind of environment that we want to have different outside of us, must start within us. If we want to have more friends, Are you somebody that people would want to be friends with? Learn to become friends with ourselves. Become the person that basically, oh my gosh, this is the saying, be the change that you want to see, like be it inside of us in order to then extend outside of us. So this concept, ideas must first belong to you before you can give them away. It is so much easier to play the victim, to assign blame and point the finger, rather than recognizing, man, if I really wanted this to change, I could start with the internal first. So this whole concept, no one can give unless he has it. If we want more love, if we want more belonging, do we actually have we actually scratched that itch inside of our own selves first? And now, when I'm going in to engage with a group, or enter into a space of a work environment or otherwise, we're bringing that which is inside of us, and then we're creating the environment as a result of that. And yes, sometimes people do need to go, and we do need to have boundaries and all of that, but for the most part, y'all, I think this is a really good opportunity for us to assume radical responsibility, to go inward and say, what was modeled for me? What am I currently replicating without intentional design in my own life? What are my ideals? And then what is the environment I need to create as a result of that? And then changing this whole concept of sacrifice to simply something that, no, I'm actually intentionally creating my own ideals, and this is part of that creation process. Now it becomes a privilege. Now it becomes something that we're in charge of rather than something we're a victim to. Just jumping back here in the chat, Courtney Baker, hello. um, Mr. Balak, hello. Christopher Adams, I'm so glad you're here. Reminds me of the first beatitude spoken by Christ. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Taryn, wisdom is not in all that is anciently written. Underboss, hello. I'm trying to scroll down and see. I'm trying to get context. Courtney Baker said that seemed weird at first, but I'm glad you're back. Batliv, hello. I'm trying to catch up with the conversation. Sorry, y'all. Jake, hello. It's been a while. 18 Mawborn. Hi, my friend. Scott Golden, hello. Good to see you. Wow, Christopher Adams, this is so good. We suffer more in imagination than in reality, Seneca. Our mind is a platform enveloping a false narrative of what we perceive if we choose to listen to our deceitful hearts which influence that. Word. Wow. Danner, hello. Thank you for joining. I'm so glad you're here. Sarah and sisters, thanks for joining. I'm glad to see you. Y'all, thank you so much for joining tonight. Aaron, thank you for hanging out with this G-Bar. Thank you for joining me tonight. I will be back on tomorrow. My goal is, I'm having a week or two of travel, so my schedule's a little bit funky, but my goal is to be back on tomorrow morning at 7:30 Eastern, 4:30 Pacific. So I will hopefully see you all tomorrow morning. We go live every single day. And if you subscribe and turn on your notifications, you'll be able to see when I schedule out the show and if there's any changes there. So have a wonderful night, y'all. Thank you so much for joining. I will see you tomorrow.